Hello, and welcome to Growing Up Late. No version left to believe. There's a moment when the story that you tell yourself stops working. That moment that the life you believe in falls apart. And in that moment, the truth is no longer optional. I've mentioned our home, my house, and that house held a lot of stories. Probably one of the fondest stories it holds is the one of my daughter's wedding. My oldest daughter was married in that house. I can picture it in my head like it was yesterday. We had this long, winding staircase. And since the house was built in 1875, it was entirely made of hand steam bent wood. It was beautiful, but not as beautiful as my daughter. She was positively glowing. She came down that staircase on my husband's arm and led through the double doors. We could all see her coming down the staircase of our Wedgwood blue ballroom that we had set up with the ceremony in the front of the room, in front of the French doors, and all of the close friends and family in seating that we'd brought in. The most adorable little flower girl and the cutest little ring bearer. Adorable kids, now long grown. And that is how I chose to see my life. Picture perfect. I made it that way. I don't know why, but it was more important to me to hold on to those stories, those moments, those picture perfect minutes, hours, and days than any of the harsh reality. There were no victims in that home. I fully participated in what was happening, and it was all good as long as I never looked too closely. As I mentioned in our last episode, I did start looking a bit closer. Over time, little by little, inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. They piled up, they nagged, they pecked at the back of my mind, refusing to be ignored. At some point, I realized I couldn't go forward in our marriage. It was a really, really hard decision. I had some good support from some friends, one in particular, who gave me the advice to just try on the idea of getting divorced. Go to a lawyer, find out what it might look like. Mind you, at this point, I have no idea the depths of the financial devastation I'm about to find out about. But I inquired with the lawyer, and we talked about forensic accounting and timing and all the things. At some point it was settled. My husband's dad was very ill and passed away. And so from the day I visited the lawyer to when I actually filed for divorce, there was a fair amount of time in between. And I just stayed busy. I still wasn't really ready to know exactly what was happening. I was just kind of waking up to it. And then he was served, and he took it in stride. It seemed to me that he had his own form of delusion going on. He would say things like, I guess you did what you had to do, but we'll always be friends. This doesn't really change anything. I mean, it changed everything, obviously. And he stayed in denial about the divorce. He didn't respond to the complaint, and in the state we lived in, it was a really simple matter to get divorced. If nobody responds 30 days later, you go to court with a witness and you hear the words, "You are a single woman," very quickly. And I didn't say anything to him at first. We stayed in the same house during the separation. It was just easier. It was a big house. He had his floor, I had mine. And I remember kind of insisting it was time for him to move. He needed to go. And he was like, I will, in time. And it just felt really tricky. And it was terrible living with somebody who you had cared for and loved for so long and had this whole life planned out of happily ever after in your picture perfect little life. Doesn't matter if it wasn't true. It's what I had told myself. You tell yourself a lie enough times, it starts to sound real. And I said to him, we're divorced now. I remember saying that to him, we're divorced. Because I didn't say anything to him when I came home from court. I was gone for an hour. It was really sad how much of no big deal it was. And he didn't believe me. Couldn't happen. He didn't get a court date. I'm like, you didn't respond. You've ignored this completely. Obviously, we ignored a lot of difficult conversations. But he came back to the house a few days later and said, well, talked to one of my friends down at the courthouse, and I guess you were right. We really are divorced. I'm like, yes, so now will you move out? And he just said he would get around to it. And it was really starting to wear on me. I couldn't start my life over in the same house. And I don't know, one day, I think the whole family was there doing our usual, watching a football game, eating a big meal, pretending everything's fine. And he said something, and that was it. It was time to go. And I told him to pack a suitcase. I literally said, you have 20 minutes, you've got to go. And I remember him just being absolutely incredulous, like I was the most unreasonable woman on the planet for feeling this way. And all I could say was, I have been trying to get you to move out for so long, to get you to move some things to a friend's house, and you have been ignoring me, and today's the day. And that, after a small drama and very little fanfare, he was gone. So now I finally get to dig in, and I don't know what kind of a detective I think I am, but I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the money. And I won't go into the details of the stories of whose name this was in and whose name that was in and how it all worked out. But I will tell you, the thing that woke me right up was getting a letter from the bank saying that my house was at end stage foreclosure. I think I mentioned before that the mail wasn't getting opened a lot. Kind of important. I was waking up, but a little bit in shock, not quite grounded in any kind of reality. But I knew I had a decision to make. And I talked to the woman and friend that I trusted the most, and she said, you've got a really big decision to make. Do you want to throw yourself into work and try and save the things, or do you want to heal? And I don't know whether it was exhaustion or an inability to show up. It wasn't that. Now that I think of it, it was exactly the opposite of that. I made a decision to let it all go. I got a notice the house would be sold on the courthouse steps, the date and time. Still didn't seem real. I mean, does that really happen in this day and age? It seemed incredulous. It just didn't seem like a thing that would happen. So I'm not sure if I visited with anybody about this. Probably not. But I decided that in order to make it real, I would go to the courthouse and find out for myself. So on that morning, probably a half hour early, I got dressed. It was an overcast, a dreary day. Perfect setup for the kind of frame of mind and mood I was in. And I walked to the courthouse alone. I walked out the front door of my grand home, dressed in my nicest and most appropriate outfit for what I was going to, I guess. And I walked slowly, deliberately, 2 blocks to get to the courthouse. And when I got there, I climbed a couple flights of stairs. It's this big, expansive staircase in front of the courthouse, with the doors that no one ever used, so I didn't know where exactly I was going or what exactly to expect, but huddled in the corner, because I think it was drizzling, were a half a dozen, mostly men in trench coats. And I walked over to where they were. Nobody asked me who I was or why I was there. They barely acknowledged me. And I just stood there, glancing at the ground occasionally, not sure where to look. I didn't know how to feel. I just knew that I needed to bear witness and to know in my heart, yes, this is all real. This is all happening. And I heard the words, on this day, the residence of is sold to. I heard the sound of a gavel, and yet I know none was there. And it was over, just like that. I walked home. I don't remember walking home. I remember being home in kind of a shocked disbelief. But I had done it. I had shown up for myself. Like fully. I was ready to know the truth. I was ready to find out what was next. I was ready to just see it all in black and white and go from there. Facing that reality did not feel like the gift that I think it later proved to be. It felt like my life was falling apart. But I know now that was the day that everything started to fall in place. That was the day I faced the truth. I paid attention to what was real, and I dropped the story. Do you have any places in your life where you cling to a story that you suspect isn't true? And even though you suspect it isn't true, you cling to it anyways? I know I'm not alone, and you're not either. When I was ready to let go of that story, everything changed. And for me, this is all about growing up late. I hope that you will join me on this journey next week as we start to turn the corner and see what happens next. The most important thing we can do is know that we're willing to see the truth, accept accountability, and move forward. Because a little bit in that moment, it crossed my mind to just lay down and give up. But there was a spark. I think by facing that reality, I sparked myself into action, and I really began to grow up. So, let's do this together. Hope to see you next week. It's time to grow up.